It's a minute gone past the hour of 9 o'clock. It is good morning to you, Grenada, Carriacou, Petite Martinique, the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. A wonderful good morning to our listeners on the radio. That's Classic 105.5 and 105.9 on the FM band. And you've been with us all morning. Welcome back to our viewers that's just joined us again on television. That's GBN Channel 7, Channel 11. Those of you in Channel 20. If you're on cable, or you're probably joining us via the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd. And we also a special thank you to those on our social media platforms, be it YouTube and Facebook. Indeed, welcome to another episode of To The Point for this, the 5th day of the month of April. My guest this morning is the NDC caretaker candidate for the Tongue of St. George, Claudette Joseph. I want to say good morning to you, Claudette, and welcome to the program.
Good morning. How are you?
I am wonderful as always, and yourself?
I'm fine, thank you.
Well,
and good morning, all of your viewers and listeners to The Point. It's good to be here once more. It's good to be here, and particularly so on behalf of the National Democratic Congress.
And it's also good to be here. Just before we get to the conversation of coming to work this morning and realizing, I met a few friends of mine. I'm like, "Where's your mask this morning?" And someone like, "Well, I still have it in my back pocket, you know." But I'm just saying, we are at this juncture where it's almost great news, good news. It's a good feeling.
Yes. But I can tell you, I will still be wearing my mask in certain places.
Yes.
And I will so encourage our people, because we have, perhaps it may be correct to say that we have entered the endemic stage of COVID, which means it will be here with us all the time. So we should not entirely drop us, given the lifting of the restrictions and so on. We should continue to be cautious and to wear our masks, especially in public spaces that are enclosed, and also regular hand washing and sanitization will go a long way.
Yeah, I think there are some values that we were forced to move from the backside of our brain to the fore. Those basic, seemingly insignificant principles of washing your hands and covering your cough and your sneeze and all those sort of things. I think we should definitely, as you said, I want to encourage, do not throw caution to the wind. Do not throw caution to the wind. But it certainly is always a good feeling, you know what, when people are saying, okay, I can breathe a sigh of relief. Well, you can continue to breathe a sigh of relief if we continue to be each other's neighbor. And you see somebody coughing or sneezing, listen, nothing is wrong. Just remind them, cover it up. You don't even have to call them by name. You just have to shout out, yo, ma'am, cover it up.
When you see
cover it up. But and certainly so, we want to encourage you wherever you are, yes, while the restrictions have been officially lifted. But as the health minister says, everything now is left up to you and I to ensure that we keep ourselves healthy. But there's a lot to be discussed, I think. I want to start up, Claudette, on the pension saga as it is. Because that's really and truly what it is. Last week, the unions, they were in celebratory mode. That was followed, and there were talks in the air, speculative talks, that the government was going to appeal the judgment. We subsequently saw that there was a release stating categorically clear that that was not the government's position. But certainly for you, the National Democratic Congress, the average Grenadian, it's some good news?
Yes, it's some good news for the pensioners. This is an issue that has plagued the workers of Grenada, the workers employed by the largest employer in Grenada, that's the government of Grenada. This has plagued them since 1983. And that's a long time. That's 39 years from my quick calculation. And so we are happy that this issue has been finally determined and resolved in favor of the workers. We congratulate the workers of Grenada. We congratulate the 3 major unions who participated in the suit. And of course, the legal team that advance the arguments for the workers. Are you hearing me? Yes, I thought I was hearing something.
No, I'm here.
Yes, and so we, as our party leader indicated in the short statement that he gave immediately after the judgment was delivered, we encourage all sides, the administration and the unions and other relevant stakeholders, including, the NIS authority and so, to sit and come up with a workable solution. We appreciate that it will cost the consolidated fund. It will cost the people of Grenada quite a lot to settle this matter in terms of the financial aspect. But that is the only fair and just thing that can happen. That's the only fair and just outcome. And that is the intention of our Constitution and the current laws in force. So we encourage meaningful, bona fide dialogue on both sides. I know, and we are familiar, we are quite aware, not familiar, we are quite aware in the NDC of the season that we are in. All of us are. And so our current administration has a tendency to engage in quick fixes and, quite frankly, gimmicks around this season. We urge that this is not the time for that. We urge for careful and deliberate solutions to this issue. And this is what the National Democratic Congress commits itself to on attaining office after the next elections, to work with the unions so that we come up with a solution whereby the judgment can be satisfied and our economy can survive at the same time.
I'm happy you've highlighted a point because regarding the settlement, there is a judgment and the judgment is separate and apart from everything else. The government has quite clearly articulated that its commitment to the process and has highlighted the challenge that the judgment, in order to satisfy the judgment, the financial asking on the Grenadian public. And you've highlighted that too. And I think most level-headed Grenadians have come to the point, listen, this is going to cost us. There is a cost to it. There is a cost to it. But some, as you have argued, that there is no other way beyond this. If that being the case, though, I'm assuming that as the National Democratic Congress, as a party, as you yourself, as the candidate for King of St. George, you've studied this astutely, and has the NDC come up with a proposal, any offering as to how do we honestly, because it will take some serious dollars to address this pension issue.
But let me say this to you, Joseph, right? The NDC, the historic record of this pension problem will show, despite what is said now, and I think it is quite unfortunate and indeed disingenuous of the current administration, rather than focusing on finding a workable solution, unleashing the surrogates and propagandists to suggest to the Grenadian people that this somehow is the NDC's fault. Even to the most ardent supporters of the current administration, this must sound ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It must be ridiculous because the record will show that although the NDC has only been in office for 8.5 of the last 39 years, you hear me? The NDC has only been in office for 8.5 of the last 39 years. It is only the NDC in office that made any meaningful attempts and advances to resolve this pension issue.
For those who are not aware,
That's a historic fact.
what are some of those meaningful advancements of which you speak?
All right, so let me tell you some of those meaningful advancements. Recall that before, I just give a quick 2-minute historic context so that the listeners can understand what I'm saying. Okay? So, before elections, we had the 1950 Pension Act, which was amended in 1958, right? And that act guarantees pension to all public workers serving in confirmed positions in public service. It guarantees them a pension of 2/3 of their last salary just before retirement. The salary they obtain just before retirement, that will be a pension. And then, of course, there's a 25% gratuity, which is 25% of your the total pension to which you're entitled. I'm just saying it very quickly. And that law also says that pension will be a charge on the consolidated fund, which is below the main government account. Okay? That is not a contributory scheme as the NI. So it means, therefore, that workers are not contributing a portion as is required by the NIS scheme. So as it stands, the bigger the public service grows, the more expensive the pension obligation of the government will be under the Pension Act, which the court has now, for the third time, declared to be the law of the land. We got our Constitution in 1974 on independence, and Section 92 of the Constitution enshrines the public sector right to pension, in that it provides that whatever laws were enforced immediately before the Constitution came into force shall remain, and any amendment to that law in relation to pension should not be less favorable to the workers. So the Constitution says you can amend the pension law,
Right.
but whatever amendment you do cannot be less favorable to workers, right? And of course, we know that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That is provided for in Section 106 of the Constitution, where it says, this Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Any law that is passed by the Parliament, which is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution, is void. All right? So, the revolution happened and the Constitution itself was suspended by the People's Law number 1. And that's number 1 of 1979. And then the government set about to establish the National Insurance Law, which is Act, I think it was 14 of 1983. And that act attempted to bring in a contributory scheme whereby the employee and the employer would contribute to the scheme. And that scheme, as we know today, would take care of many benefits that related workers never enjoyed before, such as sickness, invalidity, maternity, survivors, age, funeral. We all know them because we all apply to NIS when we do those. And also, it sought to bring in a new pension scheme, so to speak, which they refer to as the old age benefit. So on retirement, age 60, you get your NIS. Now, this came into operation in April 1983, 4th April. Now, the portion related to pension, there was a provision in the NIS Act. There is a provision in the NIS Act, 2 provisions, which taken together, that's Section 46 and 47 of the NIS Act. When you take them together, it shows that in order for the pension aspect of it to properly kick in, the minister responsible for NIS was supposed to promulgate some regulations, bring into force some regulations that will have adjusted this situation in relation to pension. Now, I'm not sure whether the PRG intended for it to be less or more favorable, because remember the Constitution was suspended, right? But at the end of the day, the intent was for these regulations to be brought into force to ultimately replace the pension scheme, the public sector pension scheme, as you know it, right? So the PRG collapsed months after. This is April 4th, 1983. And we know what happened to the PRG on October 19th, 1983. Right. So practically, they never had the opportunity to complete the work, especially the work in relation to fulfilling the requirements of sections 46 and 47 of the NIS Act.
So
we left.
Let me ask you a question, and this is for the purpose of edification, because we're not here. The idea is to educate the public.
Yes.
Help the general public to understand the term from a legal perspective. So we received our Constitution in 1974. Yeah. And we're not going to get into battling whether it's this or that or whatever. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Yes.
And it is there and enshrined to protect the rights of the citizens of the country. The term suspension of the Constitution, what exactly does it represent in actuality?
Remember the Constitution of 1974, and if you see it written anyway, but say the Constitution Order 1973, that's because it's dated December 1973, but it came into operation on independence.
Right, correct.
Right. The Constitution establishes the general procedure for the conduct, provides for elections every 5 years. It goes through the process of how Parliament is dissolved, and it outlines the constituencies and the process how members get elected to Parliament and all of that. Okay. The PRG did not came into office by that mode.
Right.
So just the very mode by which the People's Revolutionary Government came into being was itself unconstitutional.
Right.
Right. And because it was an unconstitutional acquisition of power, and for other reasons that existed at the time, given the state of things globally and so, with the Cold War existing and the alignment of the PRG, the Constitution was suspended so that the government could implement some of the measures I imagine that they would want to.
Right.
Because of the government itself would have been an illegitimate government, and that's one of the things that was discussed in the famous case by the Privy Council of Andy Mitchell and the DPP.
And
the PRG was a valid government and all of that. Privy Council held for practical purposes and under the doctrine of necessity, which is another legal concept. But they were valid. But the PRG itself came in by unconstitutional means. So one of the most convenient and the first thing they did was to suspend the Constitution.
Right.
Because remember we left the OECS court system. We abolished the Privy Council.
Right.
We did a lot of differently during that era.
And you can easily understand. I'm trying to help. Get us to understand that if you came in by unconstitutional means, you certainly then, with the Constitution being the supreme body, that would be a conflict of interest anyway. So reasonably, you could understand the suspension. But even with that, because the act itself was illegal, and making reference to the section of the Constitution, section 92, that makes provision that any enactment or changes made to the pension cannot be less. It means whatever took place within that period, whether it means whatever offerings, it has to be something, an offering or amendment to it that puts the working class people in a better position. So with that being said, you ask yourself, why is it therefore, and if the Constitution spells that out, why is it we spent the greater part of more than a generation bantering over something that is clearly written out in the Constitution of Grenada? Why?
And good question, and I'll tell you something. And I'm here this morning on behalf of the National Democratic Congress to help debunk the lies being told at this time, because about the efforts made and why we are where we are today, all these years later, and 3 judgments later, 3 times the court said this is unconstitutional. Now, one of the things the PRG did when the NIS Act came into force was to pass what we know as the Pensions Disqualification Act. And that's people's law. Back in the day, in the revolutionary days, the laws were called people's laws. People's Law 24 of 1983 provided that any person who was appointed to public service after April 4th, 1983, will not be entitled to pension or gratuity under the Pension Act, but only to the NIS benefits, which is substantially less than what they would have gotten under the Pension Act, being 2/3 of their last salary. And so the intention of the PRG scheme was to create a new regime, a new pension regime. But as I said before, they didn't have the opportunity to complete that because they collapsed in October, months after, right? And so the first thing that happened is that the Constitution was restored after the invasion. So by 1984, we went back to the Constitution. The suspension was lifted, and we went back to the constitutional democracy, as it was called at the time. And then at that time, we had the first elections. I think it was December 84. So from 1985 to 1990, the NNP was in office. And from my recollection, and anybody who was in the NNP regime that time can correct me by providing proof that attempts were made to resolve this issue. But I could find none. Right? Nothing was done between 1985 and 1990 by the NNP to resolve the pension issue. Then in 1990, the NDC won the elections. And Sir Nicholas Buffett was Prime Minister at the time. And what my investigation shows is that an opinion and report was solicited by the government from the then Solicitor General on the issue of public sector pensions, because even as early as then, it was recognized that with the return of the Constitution and the existence of the Pensions Disqualification Act into the laws of Grenada, because what happened after the Constitution was restored, Parliament passed a law called the Validation Act. That's in February, I think it was 22nd February, thereabout, 1985. So immediately after the NNP won the first elections after the invasion, they passed the Validation Act in early 1985, which declared all the laws passed by the PRG to be valid and to be the laws of the land. So there would have been some that would turn out to be unconstitutional. Now that included the Pension Disqualification Act. So the Sir Nicholas Buffett government obviously recognized that this could get tricky, and they asked for an analysis and report out of the Legal Affairs Office at the time. Dr. Alexis was the Attorney General, and that report was rendered and certain recommendations were made. I think that report was sometime in 1994, and certain recommendations were made as to how the pension payable under NIS can be brought into alignment with the pension entitled that the public sector is entitled to under the Pension Act. Well, we know what happened, Joseph, right? Mm-hmm. The NDC, months after that, was voted out of office. There is no evidence whatsoever that between 1995, when the NDC was voted out of office, and 2008, the NNP was in office between 1995 and 2008. I can find nothing to suggest that the report that was done by the Solicitor General during the NDC time was used to advance the issue, that anything was done to address the issue.
So let me ask Claude, because I'm listening, and I'm finding it difficult to even appreciate how is it that all these years that we, and I'm saying leaders, because collectively, I think at the end of the day, it needed a collective approach, and it goes beyond party lines. But I find it difficult to even appreciate in any way, form, or fashion that men that are elected to serve the people that's protected under the Constitution, the very Constitution that allows for an electoral process that everybody, the democracy that we enjoy, the Westminster system of election, first past the post, I get you into office. We appreciate that element of it. That's under the Constitution. But why then the other elements that seeks to protect the people? Why is it that for for over 30 plus years, that it seems as though nobody was willing, and we had to keep going to the court to try to ask the court, is it right or wrong? When in fact, to me, the question should not even be asked. The question all of these years should be, how do we go ahead to give the people of Grenada that which rightfully belongs to them? Not asking the court if we should.
Let me say this to you, and I would want to correct you in terms of part of what you just said. We have a tendency to whitewash things and say it's all government and across the board. That is actually not true, based on what I just told.
No. I understand that, but I don't want this. Not true. And I could appreciate that, but I don't want us to make the politics out of it.
Let us not whitewash it.
But it's not going to change.
And try to make it as though everybody failed. The reason why I take issue with that is because I just said two things, which are facts. The first fact is that between 1984 and today, between October 1983 and today, except 1 year when there was an interim government, 83 to 84, and 8.5 years when the NDC was in office, one political party had power, the NNP. Right? So minus, so you're talking 31, 32 years of the NNP being in office. You had 13 unbroken years between 1995 and 2008. And now you have going on 10 unbroken years.
So that
is why I say.
And I can appreciate that.
Hold on, sir. And then I said to you, the second thing I said is that so far, we see the Sir Nicholas Brockett NDC making an attempt to address the issue and shortly thereafter being voted out of office, just like the PRG, not having an opportunity to complete the work they started. Now, government is a continuum. So what responsible, accountable government does is that it builds on what its predecessors left behind. I could find no evidence that anything was done with the work that was done by Sir Nicholas's Brockett's Sir Nicholas's government. Then we had McQueen. McQueen was retired from the public service in 1998. That's smack in the middle. That's 10 years before the NNP lost the election. They lost in 2008. He was retired in 97, and he was not paid his pension. He sued, and it's on September 15th, I'll give the precise date, September 15th, 1998, the Court of Appeal ruled that the Pension Disqualification Act was unconstitutional. Therefore, the proper law would be the Pensions Act, right? That's 1998. 3 years into the NLP second term since the invasion.
No, and you're right, Claudette.
Yes.
But you're right. Remember, I am not, and I am agreeing with all that you're saying, but the very point you made, that's what I was hinting to, that at the end of the day, government is a continuum. So that's what I'm saying. I'm trying not to worry too much about the parties, but I'm saying government in its broadest framework has a responsibility. And it begs me this next question before we go into the break, though, because it was the initial question I asked, because I'm assuming, given that we can well appreciate that government is a continuum, right? And that you're seeking now to get into power, I'm assuming reasonably that you've sat down as a party and given serious you've lost sleep over this, as to how we are going to finish that which was started under our late Prime Minister.
But our people need to know from us the historic context and the efforts we in government have made so far, right up to the last time we were in office.
And I'm okay with that.
So that they have confidence that the NDC is the only political party here in Grenada in office who will sort out this matter once and for all, right? And so I will answer you. So we're going to a break.
Yes,
I will answer you.
When we come back,
but on behalf of my party, I will take exception to any suggestion that the NDC did nothing, because this is a line the current administration is trying to push after having 2 years to fix it in office and not fixing it. You understand what I'm saying?
I
will definitely. And listen to it. Anytime you say I'm going to stop you because it's not true.
We are going to smile at it. We are going to smile at it. We get the answer. We get the response to the question as to exactly how the NDC's, what is the NDC's plan to satisfy that. But we have to take a quick commercial.
Understand the context.
And I appreciate that. We'll take a quick commercial break. To my guest this morning, the NDC's candidate for the Tongue of St. George, Claudette Joseph. Quick commercial break. And
historian, archivist, author, former Peace Corps volunteer, and lots more. It's the John Angus Martin story on Interesting Grenadians this Wednesday, 6th April at 8 p.m. on GBN TV and social media platforms. Join us.
You know, one day I woke up and, you know, they painted a set of pedestrian crossing all along the streets. You know, nobody told us how to use that thing properly.
I know how.
You're serious?
Every safe, good driver knows about these things. As a driver, you have to be very attentive. You know you're coming up close to a pedestrian cross, you start slowing down immediately, looking to see if there's any pedestrian on the side getting ready to cross. If there is, you stop on the line that is a certain distance before the crosswalk. Then you would see the pedestrian put their hands out, looking directly at you, indicating that they are going to cross. And only when you have come to a complete stop, that is when they will quickly and safely cross to the other side. And then you continue happily on your journey.
Stop, look, hand out, eye contact, wait for pedestrian to cross. Then you happily continue on your journey.
This message is brought to you by this group of insurance companies, the Traffic Advisory Body and the Traffic Department.
It's 26 minutes on to the hour of 10 o'clock. Welcome back to The Point. And my guest this morning is NDC's caretaker candidate for the Tongue of St. George, Claudette Joseph. And we've been discussing the pension issues, going through debunking myths, truth, separating truth from what is truth, what is faction, what is facts. And certainly, Claudette, we've been going through that quite nicely. I think we've gotten to the point where we've appreciated, you've clearly articulated for the last 39 years what the position, the NDC government's position on restoring, correcting the sins of our forefathers. I'm just going to put it nicely.
I actually didn't complete that. Because these are facts that it is important all our people have. All Grenadians have these facts. So we had in 1998 the McQueen judgment, where the court for the first time declared the Pension Disqualification Act unconstitutional and the law of the land to be the Pension Act 1958. No attempts were made to address that or to fix the problem in light of the ruling of the court. It appears that McQueen was treated as an individual, not that his position applied to all public workers. And that should have been the position. July 2008, we know what happened then. The NDC won. In 2009, Miss Armstrong, Hermelyn Armstrong retired from the public service. Again, she wasn't getting her pension under the Pension Act. She sued in 2010. This is the NDC. Here's what the NDC did months after Hermelyn Armstrong sued. NDC hired an international firm of actuaries, right? That's the first thing it did. It held a massive consultation with all stakeholders, and it commissioned a report. And that report is dated July 2011, and it's a Simon Sutcliffe. Simon Sutcliffe, and my tongue is tying up, right? Sutcliffe, right? And it's a report on Grenada Public Service pension arrangements dated July 2011, and it is very detailed. It dealt with current pension benefits payable by the government of Grenada. It looked at all the data and made certain assumptions, existing liabilities, how we treated the officers post 1983, all other issues. And at that time, that study done by the NDC, the work that done by the NDC showed that the pension liability for the government of Grenada at the time was $631 million. All right? The court ruled in favor of Armstrong in October 2012. Three things about the Armstrong case.
But if you don't mind holding for me, Claude, because I just want to entertain a question from a caller, and then we can go back to it. Good morning, caller. You're live.
Yes. Good morning, and good morning to your listening public, and good morning to your guests.
Good morning, sir.
We'll give all the reasons why NDC could not have attended to the issue of the pension when they were in office. And my belief is, if you really want to do something, you do it, rather than find excuses. Your guests say that NDC was in office twice, not once, twice. And all explanation can be made to go back to Oyoho, as old people say. The fact is, NDC on two occasions didn't see the need to address that situation and bring a conclusion to that. That is the basic thing here. They didn't see that as important. So we go back all around the same way the ruling administration said, and probably you could blame them, and I'm blaming two of the government. I ain't hitting an NDC alone. That years ago they probably didn't see the need. But I want to say that clearly. And I want to address that to your guests. One, the NDC is promising all contract workers will be made permanent. The NDC is offering, if they win, gas price going down. The NDC is offering, if they win, the cost of living going down. NDC is offering, if they win, they will deal with the pension issue.
Well, let me ask you, sir. Let me ask you, sir. Let me ask you, sir. You said they're offering that. Are you taking that from what position are you articulating this?
Well, I'm saying that coming to the point. One was offered because they're promising that.
But who exactly? Who is this?
Well, the leader
position from the NDC.
Your guest just said that they will deal with the pension issue once and for all. I've heard NDC candidates on separate occasions saying that they would, because of the surrogates, because of, I hear the leader of the NDC spoke in Miami, but the pensioners said they will deal with it.
Yeah, but I think in all fairness to the conversation, I think politicians on both sides of the floor, they would promise you that they would put measures in place to address the issue of cost of living. Right. So it's not fair to say one political organization is making that assertion. But I'm coming to
the question, and I have one more promising me that they wouldn't make, and this is promising they wouldn't make those people on the road, the traffic wardens go. I want to ask the dear lady what it is that NDC is not promising the Grenadian people, because it seems as if the only thing NDC is not promising is long life, but they have the solution to every other thing. Thank you. Have a good morning.
I would probably hope we will be happy that we have solutions to our problems in Grenada. But Claudette, your response?
I did not hear the end. After you asked the question, the audio wasn't good.
I think he was asking, what is it that the NDC is not offering? He said that you seem to be offering everything.
Listen to me. I recognize the voice of that caller, and I can guarantee you that he is one of those propagandists and stooges calling all the stations, spewing untruths. Because he could not be listening from the beginning of the program where I spoke to the efforts of this Nicholas Buffett administration, and where I was speaking to the efforts of the Tillman Thomas administration in the detailed analysis that was done to resolve the matter. And that was happening while Armstrong was in court. Armstrong got her judgment in October 2012. That's a fact. 13th October 2012. NDC was voted out 19th February 2013. Another fact.
Let's hold that right there, Claudette.
NDC had less time than the PRG.
We have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Cadore. Greetings and greetings to your guest. I trust that the person can hear me. Ms. Joseph can hear me. Listen. A little earlier, you asked a question of Ms. Joseph. Why did it all these years, a decade plus, that the people who were charged with the responsibility of running this country and upholding the laws and so on did nothing about this pension thing and continued to violate the rights of the people? Well, I'll tell you what. The truth is, in this country, we have been perverted with quote-unquote shameless institutionalized hypocrisy, which has destroyed the untrustworthiness of the people who put themselves forward to run this country. But let's go to the meat of the matter. Ms. Joseph, I have two questions for you. One, 2 years ago, just around, all going into 3, we had the globe was plagued with a virus and so on, and it demanded that certain serious measures be taken to try to combat it and to protect lives and livelihood that we spoke about. Today, that has gone, yet we continue to live under a quote-unquote state of emergency. I'd like to get your view on that. What warrants this continued state of emergency, and what is your party contemplating to get this news, or at least to assist in getting this news from around the necks of the people? There's another question I wanted to ask you. You see, I'm getting old. I may come back. Oh no, go ahead. I'll come back. But let me hear your answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. All the best to you. Claudette?
Yeah, the audio is not great, so I didn't hear all of what Mr.
I think he's sure he's addressing the issue of the state of emergency.
Yes, I heard that question.
Yes.
And the truth is there is no need for the state of emergency at this time. That is our position. The state of emergency should be completely lifted. That's our position. There really is no need for any aspect of the state of emergency to remain in place. And quite frankly, the propriety of the state of emergency in the first place was always a questionable one, whether it was necessary have a state of emergency in the first to address the issues relating to COVID-19. So there is no need for the state of emergency. I did not hear the second question.
Well, I think there was a preamble to it where he basically, in short, said, listen, the Constitution has been raped and plundered in the past by our leaders who've been really and truly seemingly not interested in upholding it. And then the question, he says old age kicked in. He was having a difficulty in remembering his second question. But his initial question was that of the issue of the state of emergency.
Well, I wouldn't argue with him. We have a long history of particularly our current leaders violating the Constitution in many respects. And I mean, I could cite quite a few, the Constitution being violated. And the court, the arm of the state dealing with the judiciary being disregarded and disrespected, and the judgments not being complied with. So I wouldn't argue with him on that at all.
But you know what is interesting, Claude, before we go to the next caller, that there is the Constitution, and then there's the arm of government, the legislature, the judiciary, and everything. You are willing to rape and plunder and ignore that which is enshrined under the Constitution that gives us our dignity, makes us who we are as people, and then you turn to an arm of government, the judiciary, to then ask it to render a judgment over something that really and truly it will be a travesty of justice for any legal luminary, for the judiciary to state anything otherwise, because they must be guided by that which is enshrined on the law in the Constitution. Yeah. So why even bother? Why even bother? I'm not sure. But maybe this caller, we have a caller on the line. We have a caller. Good morning, caller.
Yes, Mr. Joseph, if you'll permit me, sir.
Yes.
The last thing is this. Citizen Joseph, Section 32, subsection 3 of the so-called Constitution of this here country, and you know my position on it, stipulates crystal clear that the ballot for the elections should be done in a way as to guarantee that no other person knows who any other person votes for. Yet in the RPA, known as the, you know what that means, Representation of the People's Act.
Yes.
That says somewhere down the road that I, as a visually impaired person, have to go into the polling booth with somebody else, a friend of mine, and whatnot and whatnot. My secret is mine. How come a friend had to go inside the booth with me? Question is, doesn't the Representation of the People Act contravene what the Constitution says? Your views on it? And in event it is not a matter that you people have looked at prior, I'd like you to look at it from your party's perspective to have a change for the next election. And please, have no fear in consulting me. I can give you some ideas, cheap, simple, economical, whatever you want to call it, to guarantee that the people with visual impairment in this country have the rights fulfilled according to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, Article 15. Thank you very much and have a nice day, will you?
All the best to you. Thank you. Claudette?
Listen, again, Joseph, I didn't hear the end of what Mr. Rollo was saying, but I think I heard him to be suggesting that there might be some constitutional infringement by the section of the RPA that requires visually impaired people to be accompanied by someone.
Correct.
Well, you know, there is only one way that laws passed by Parliament are declared unconstitutional, and that is by citizens challenging those laws in the courts. Right? So if Mr. Rollo is of the view that there is a constitutional breach in the provisions of the RPA dealing with voters who are visually impaired, perhaps he may want to consider challenging that section of the RPA in court. I must confess it's not something that I have looked at in terms of whether the Constitution specifically said how the visually impaired should vote, or I know it says secret ballot, right? I know it says by secret ballot, but it also says that Parliament may make laws for
435-2041, that's the number on the inside. Yes. This is To The Point. My guest this morning, Claudette Joseph of the National Democratic Congress. Yes, Claudette? Mm-hmm.
So, sorry. Yes, I was saying the Constitution also empowers Parliament to make laws for the carrying out of its provisions, including the provisions relating to election of members of the of Parliament. So, Mr. Rollo, perhaps that's something we can have a discussion on offline.
Okay, let's go to the telephone line now. Good morning, caller. You're live.
Hi. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Miss Claudette.
Good morning,
Miss Claudette. I want to ask you, if NDC government was in power right now, loving and caring for the people of this country, what step you all will take out to do to ease up the burden of the prices and the shelf right about now? I know there is we're talking about outside, yeah. But I think a caring government should look into the situation, especially with the daily, the regular goods on the shelf, to do something to ease up the burden of these people in this country. It's real heartbreaking. Let me hear if our NDC government was in power right about now, what it could do to ease up the pressure.
Thank you very much, caller.
Yes, caller. Indeed, that's a burning issue for all of the people of Grenada, the cost of living. And one thing an NDC government would have done is to attempt to reduce some of the duties payable at the port. That's one way the government could actually help to ease the burden. Because with the onset of COVID and now with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, what we have is that the cost of shipment, cost of international shipment, export, import, and so has increased astronomically. The price of oil went up on account of the war and on account of the pandemic. The freight payable for shipping goods increased astronomically. What has not changed here in Grenada is the duty. So what has been happening on port duties are payable on freight. So that although the percentage payable on freight charges has not changed, the quantum, the amount of money the government is getting has increased because duties are payable on freight. So government could pass that extra, that surplus or that savings back to the people by perhaps reducing on the percentage of the duties payable at the port. Okay. That's one easy and immediate way that you will see a reduction or at least a leveling off of prices of food stuff on the shelf.
We have another caller on the line, Claudette. One moment. Good morning, caller. You're live.
Good morning, Joseph. Good morning to Claudette, Miss Joseph.
Morning.
I have a question. As a member of the bar and a member of the government in waiting, what are you and your party or your government is going to do to address the issue of there's an arm of government, the judiciary, that seems to be not working or very working slow. We've seen, lawyers have to demonstrate the state of, that building in town where you used to have the High Court is in total, disrepair. What are you going to do to address it? There are so many of us, relatives and friends waiting on High Court decision that it seems to be taking forever. For example, I have a personal matter that is over 6 years. Our children need justice delayed is justice denied. And we really want to know, what are you all going to do to address that situation?
Thank you, caller. 5 minutes on to the hour,
Claudette. Yes, thank you, caller. That's a very, very good question. First of all, let me say that the judges we have in Grenada and the staff, the registrar and her staff at the court, and also the staff of the magistrates court, they work very hard. I am an active practicing lawyer. I appear before the judges every day. So I can tell you our judges work very hard. In fact, our judges are overworked in our opinion. A lot of work to be done. And they get it done. The circumstances under which they work can be improved. In 2010, when I was vice president of the Bar Association, we lobbied the government, that was the NDC government, to appoint some judicial assistants. That's young lawyers who will help the judges with preparing judgments, doing research, that kind of thing. And the Chairman Thomas government approved 2 judicial assistants. And as far as I am aware, as of today, only 1 has been appointed. And those provisions are there in the budget for these assistants. So another judicial assistant can be appointed. The registrar, we had also proposed when I was vice president that the registrar has another deputy because the registrar is overworked. All of our registrars, one after the other, tend to get sick. And a lot of the times it's stress related. The other thing we will do is to improve the physical environment that the workers in the judicial systems must work under. The NDC actually earmarked a plot of land in 2010, 2011. I can speak to that personally because I was on the Bar Association executive at the time, and on a small committee between the lawyers and judges that we try to work together. I was there at that time. So, plot of land, designs for a new Hall of Justice, because we need proper and adequate spaces for our people to work, right? Just as how we have the ministerial complex, that's the seat of the executive. And you have the Parliament building, that's the seat of the legislature. The only arm of government that has been consistently ignored is the courts. The courts need a Hall of Justice. And the NDC had everything in place for the construction of a Hall of Justice right next to the Parliament building. And those plans were quashed. The plans were drawn, everything. Those plans were quashed. So we need to do that. And we need to continuously train our court staff. But I cannot, working in the system, my sister, I cannot fault the judges nor the registrar and her staff, because I know they work hard under very, very trying circumstances. Okay. But government needs to invest more in the judicial arm. There is also recently the astronomical increase in fees that the ordinary man in Grenada must pay to process their matters in court. I'm talking about for example, in the case of an administration of an estate, it went from something like $25 in the past to over $1,000, $1,100, right? It's very expensive now to file matters in court. A claim that used to be $25 to file is now $150 something or something like that in total. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at these things and see how we can provide for our indigent people, our people who can't afford it, to help them to access justice. Because if the people cannot access justice, then we don't have a fair and democratic society. So these are the things. We will definitely do the Hall of Justice. Right. We will definitely work on our deeds and land registry, where the records are in terrible condition. I don't know if I could do a screen share to show you some pictures I took some time ago of the state of our records at the registry, and that has been neglected. The last time an attempt was made to digitize the records at the registry again was during 2011, 2012, during the last NDC administration, and then the project was abandoned after the election. My people of Grenada, the facts show that the NDC is the one who pay attention to these things that affect and impact the lives of people. We don't do ploys and gimmicks, right? And machinations that will fool people into believing that we work for them. We actually work for the people. And that's what the record shows. In fact, that's why I'm in the NDC.
Thank you, Claudette. We out of time. The hour runs, and we know that for a fact. Indeed, it's always a pleasure being here with you. I want to say thanks to my guest this morning, Claudette Joseph, and she's the NDC candidate for the town of St. George. It's always a pleasure having you on.
Always a pleasure. Let's work with it. Move Grenada forward. To work with the unions, and so to resolve this pension issue, work out a methodology by which the court decision can be satisfied, right, and the pensioner Grenada receive their money. Indeed. Only time will tell how this court is a judgment, but how this saga is going to translate itself. I want to say thanks to all our listeners, all of the viewers, wherever you are. Those on radio, television, or you followed us via the World Wide Web or on different social media platforms. Indeed, it's always a pleasure having you here in the Modern Time. Until then, so long, everybody. JC loves you. Have yourself a great one.